Welcome to the Bible class of Jews for Jesus with Bob Mendelsohn.
We're looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 4 tonight, a letter that Paul wrote, and he has so many emotions that he's communicating through this whole letter. He wants to remind them of things, he wants to challenge them, he wants to correct them, and in this particular chapter, which would have been, remember, just a few sentences in his pen, he's going to do many of those things. So let's read 1 Corinthians chapter 4. Paul's letter to the Corinthians has the emotion of, as he says here, a father. And you can't beat that. He's not the boss, though at times he seems superior. He's not this self-degrading person in light of the honor that these guys are because he's trying to do some quid pro quo. He's being a father, and therefore you humble yourself before your kids that they might be exalted. You want the kids to get better than you. I don't know if that was your family's experience, but it certainly was mine. Every generation that my father told me about wanted their children to be more advanced, more technological, more academic, richer, better off in so many ways. And I certainly want that for my children. I want them to have more, learn more, love more, etc. And every daddy, I think, wants that. Well, that's how he self-describes here in chapter 4. He says, you have a lot of tutors, verse 15, but you don't have many fathers. And I became, in Messiah, your father through the gospel. So I want to treat you like children, not like you are childish, but like you are my kids and I want you better off. So that's why he's doing these corrections. Let's go back to verse 1. Here's how I want you to understand me or to treat me as servants of Messiah. Now, we miss this because of the word servant. We can think of, I don't know, what do you think of when you think of servants? Okay, that's it. Good to have a pop image to lean on. A servant may be someone who attends to you at the restaurant, the maitre d' maybe, or even the waiter. Because the next word, and stewards of the mysteries of God. Stewards is the Greek word oikonomos, the servant, the housekeeper, but not like the maid, more like an administrator. So the difference between that and servant is clear for me because it's the word huperetes. Huper meaning under, and retes meaning rower. And this is a nautical image that he's using. And Corinth was, of course, a seaside village that became a giant town, a big city in the day. And they would have all understood what a huperetes is. We don't, because we don't live in a nautical world, though we live next to the sea. But imagine, if you will, an ancient ship. They didn't have motors, and they had guys underneath. They were lower stage guys, and they would row together. And right in front of them would be, to me, my captain. And the captain sat one level up, not a giant deck up, but just a meter up, maybe. And he would bark and tell me when to row and when to stop. And if I rowed when it wasn't time to row, or I stopped when it wasn't time to stop, I would mess up the whole system. Think in terms of horsepower moving a car. Car might have 100 horsepower, 200, 400 horsepower, and you hear those boys driving past us here in the shop. They've got loud engines. Well, that's how many horses would powerfully move that car at that speed. Same thing, they would have manpower to move, or rowing power to move a big ship through the Aegean Sea or the Mediterranean, or whatever it was. And the way it works is if every under-rower, every huperetes, every servant rows together and stops together. And that's how you steer through some wicked passages when you had to look out and say, uh-oh, right side you stop, left side you go, and that turns the ship. Or the rudder guy would do what he needs. So this means when he says, I want you to regard us like guys who are obeying the captain. We're down at the hull of the ship. We can't even see where we're going, but we're driving it. And we want to be those kinds of people who serve Yeshua. That's my identity. Later on he'll say, I'm a father father to you. But relating to Messiah, I'm his under rower. That is a great way to live. So at least I've seen that. Now, he's also known, in chapter 1, he was called an apostle, and he calls himself a minister. He uses all these terms of himself, and each one carries a different valence, different meaning. When you think of apostle, what do you think of? What do you think of when you think apostle? A missionary, one who is sent forth. That's what the word literally means.
Those who were with Jesus.
Well, of course, Paul wasn't, but he had an encounter. So people who were disciples who walked with Yeshua back in the day, so physically, visibly saw Messiah, walked with him, that's cool. Think of authority, apostolic authority. Is it significant or is it minimal? Yeah, it would be vast. An apostle who's writing to the church telling them what to do, not just Tom, Dick, or Shmuel. I mean, he's the apostle Paul. He's there and has a weight in his communication to them. But he says, don't think of me like that. Think of me like your dad. And really think of me like a servant of Messiah. And I want you to join me in that servitude. That's pretty cool when you think of it. He doesn't come off with some kind of, I've got clout and you people better listen to me. He says, I don't really care if you judge me. Verse 3, it's a small thing that I'm examined by you. Doesn't even worry me what you think of me. He says, I don't even examine myself. Now that, of course, doesn't mean he doesn't examine himself and consider. He's just saying, in this regard, that's not the way I'm acquitted. That's not how I'm evaluated. My evaluation that really matters is Messiah. And what does he think of me? Later on, he's going to tell us about evaluating yourself, judge yourself, and see if you're in the faith. He's going to talk about self-examination in chapters 11 and later. But here he's not saying evaluate yourself to see if you're okay, because your being okay is already determined by Messiah and your love for him and his love for you. That's a comfort, isn't it? I would say. So that's the image, huperetes. And then stewards, the oikonomos, the housekeeper, the administrator of the house. Like, what was the famous one in the Older Testament in Egypt, who was an administrator of a house? Joseph, who was the administrator over the house of Potiphar, the two I see in Egypt, the Pharaoh, then Potiphar, and behind him was the oikonomos, Joseph, who ran things. He wasn't just a guy who dusted or brought milk and cookies at the end of the day. No, he was the administrator. And so that's the term that we're called. We're administrators, but not of the clerical aspects of the church. We're stewards of the, verse 1, mysterion, mysteries of God. That's a literal transliteration, if you will. Mysterion, the mysteries of God. What would be some of the mysteries of God? God himself, isn't it?
Can't be explained.
Trinity.
Ooh, good. How do you explain the Trinity? I've been a believer 40 years. I still don't get it. I believe it. I try to explain it. I still don't get it. That's a mystery. What else? Paul uses that phrase, being charged with the mysteries in Colossians. The death and resurrection of Messiah, that's mysterious. So many Jewish people still think Messiah will come and be the victor, not the victim. And so one of the great mysteries is that the Messiah must die. It's a mystery, but it's not hidden. It's a mystery that is hidden and revealed, but it's not like you have to go to some of these mystery classes, Est, or the Forum, or whatever it's called now, or get the book The Secret, or take the course in miracles. And all of these are designed to reveal hidden mysteries. Really, they're designed to get money out of your wallet. That's a little more honest. Because the mysteries of God are revealed to those who are humble, not to those who pay $500 for a weekend course. And if you ever get approached by someone in a Jews for Jesus garb who says, if you'll just pay this and come to that event, you can get this special mystery package from heaven, then you'll know it's fake. You'll know it's wrong. Because God's mysteries are not purchasable. They are revealed only to the humble, not to the paying. You have to pay with humility and not with pride. So stewards of the mysteries of God. Stewards, housekeepers, I've got it. I want to pass it on to others. So that, the death and resurrection of Messiah. That Jews and Gentiles can be one in the same body. That's a mystery. That was revealed after the resurrection. That was not known before. What? There goes the neighborhood. That was our impression of Gentiles hanging out with the Jews. But no, it's a mystery. Not one you have to pay for, but one that's been hidden and revealed to the humble. And now that steward, verse 2, has to be found trustworthy. And that's so it was with Joseph and Potiphar, and so it is with us. That when God gives you something, you have to be counted worthy of maintaining and transmitting. Verse 5, so don't go on passing judgment before the time. Wait until the Lord comes. He's going to bring everything out. He's going to light the things hidden in the darkness, disclose the motives of men's hearts. And then, if you're going to get praise, it'll come from God. How often a day do you hear yourself or others evaluate the motives of people? I know why they're doing that. I know why that government official said that. No, you don't. You know what they said, but you don't know why they said it. You know what people do, but you don't know why they do what they do. That disclosing of the motive of a man's heart is to be God's and only God's. That's why Jesus said, don't judge, lest you be judged, because you don't know why people do what they do. But we get caught out in that all the time. I'm not exactly judging, I'm just evaluating. No, that's called judging. And you try to sort out the motives or the reason people do what they do. Guy's mean to you at work or doesn't talk to you kindly on the subway or the train, and you know why. No.
Sometimes I find that it can be a fine line between judgment and discernment, which we do need.
Judging has an element of condemnation in it. Discernment has a way of self-protecting in it, which is reasonable and right. And if you don't look after yourself, who is going to? So I think it's right to discern. And Hebrews tells us that by practice or by training, we'll be able to discern the intentions of the heart, usually our own it's talking about. So it's right to self-evaluate and critique yourself so that you improve and use that for discernment. I think you're right. Discernment's an important element of growing in Messiah. So verse 6, now these things, brothers, I figuratively applied to myself and Apollos so that you may learn not to exceed what's written, so that no one of you becomes arrogant in behalf of one against the other. Who says you're superior? And he's going to carry on that theme for several chapters. He's going to continue to say, don't be arrogant. Who taught you this stuff? Meaning, I didn't teach you this. Why are you living in the natural instead of the humble and the godly? If the Apostle Paul is a father, and if he is a servant, he wants that for them as well. He wants all the believers in Corinth to act like ministers. When I say the word minister, don't think of the one professional who stands up in front of a Sunday or Saturday church and speaks. Think in terms of those under-rowers, because that's who we are in Messiah. We're all in the same ship, the fellowship. We're all in the same ship. We've all got the same row, different oars, but it works the same way. And God wants us to minister to other people, to be worthy, trustworthy of the mysteries God's given us. So at work and in the neighborhood and with families and with people we don't know, we should turn and transmit that to others. In a humble way, not in a mocking way, not in a pompous way, not in an arrogant way, he says. Verse 7, who regards you as superior? What do you have you didn't receive? Earlier we read, if anyone boasts, let him boast in this, that he knows me and understands me, from Jeremiah 9. You're not supposed to boast. But if you do want to boast, boast that you know the Lord. And then you have to remember, how did you find God? Were you so special? Were you so holy? Were you so significant as you traveled life's road and you said, yes, I think I'll condescend to allow God into my life? No, he chases you into the corner. But he paints you into there and you say, I found the Lord? I mean, it's nonsense. God finds us. So if we do boast in knowing God, it's because God is worthy to be praised because he has found us and he's welcomed us into his family. How awesome is that? So what do you have that you didn't receive? And if you did receive it, why do you boast as if you hadn't received it? Meaning as if you earned it. You can't earn it. That's the religions of the world today. That's the philosophies of the world today. I had a fellow tell me yesterday, Jewish guy, tell me that he didn't need to go to Yom Kippur because he didn't sin this year. I thought, everybody else in your world knows you've sinned. I don't know him well enough to explain to him that he's sinned in what particular ways, but give me 10 minutes and I'd probably figure out something. But golly, do you know that you've sinned this year, this week, probably this hour, this today? We all fall short. I don't know anybody who's sinless. So how can we possibly claim to earn this righteous standing with God? How can we earn it?
Maybe he wasn't enlightened being that he hasn't sinned.
The first thing you learn when you get enlightened is how dark you are. All cities are beautiful at nighttime. You ever seen a city that's ugly at night? You can't. Because if they don't have lights on, it's just dark and it's okay. But if they do have lights on, it'll be shining on a nice building, on a nice scene, a beautiful park, statue here or there. Everything looks good, especially from a distance. I was in Scotland and I was seeing all these beautiful buildings far away across whatever the river was. And there it was lovely. Then the next morning I'm walking by and there's rubbish from the McDonald's and there's cigarette butts all over the place. And I'm looking around saying, gosh, this is a filthy place. And all the papers from all the Fringe Festival that all the people had thrown down on the ground, nobody had swept up yet. You know, there's something about it. It was the same city. It was the same scene. Why did I see it so differently? Darkness makes everything look nice, but light exposes things. And you go into your basement, you go into your attic, and it looks pretty good until you turn on a torch and you see the spider webs and you see the rubbish and you see the things that really are out of order and the puddles, and you think, you know, somebody should really see to this, but I'm turning off my torch and getting out of here. So enlightenment shows us our darkness, and that is a good thing. The mistake that the French made in the Enlightenment, that era that we call the Enlightenment, is that they saw only the good of man and not the bad of man. They failed to see the darknesses in all their enlightenment. I don't want to discount light. However, light has a way of showing what's really underneath. God calls us children of light. Doesn't mean Mr. and Mrs. Light had children. What it means is that we should live as if we are in the light. And light exposes darkness, and we grow closer to God as He shows us our darknesses, and we expose those to God. I've been doing a lot of gardening as springtime has hit, and it's great. Not while I'm doing it, but when it's done, I look up, I say, that looks pretty good. And I had a couple neighbor girls come over and help. They're sweet, little, I think 10 or 11 years old, and they just love getting dirty. So they came and climbed in my garden, and they were pulling weeds, pulling grass. About 3/4 of the weeds that they pulled, they didn't pull. They just took the tops off, so now they're back. But I've been taking them from the root, because the way to get rid of a thing is to expose it to the light. And that's what you do when you communicate to God, when you honestly tell God, these are my sins. You expose them to God, who is the light, and then He can deal with them. But as long as you hide them, leave them in darkness, say it's not that bad, then they'll just keep rooting through your system, and it'll be harder and harder to get rid of. It's not the way it works in botany. Verse 8, you're already filled. You've already become rich. You've become kings without us, and indeed I wish you had become kings, so that we also might reign with you. I think God exhibited us apostles, last of all, as men condemned to death, because we've become a spectacle to the world, both to angels and to men. We're fools, but you're prudent. We're weak. You're strong. You're distinguished. We don't have anything going for us. We have no honor. We're hungry. We're thirsty. We're poorly clothed, roughly treated, homeless. We toil, but you guys are living it up. You guys are doing fine. This is a stark contrast painting, isn't it? You ever seen how a negative is made into a print of a photo? It's a negative, and you turn it around and you shine the light from the other side and you mark it on a piece of paper, and it becomes a positive. It becomes a print, and you can look and say, oh, there's Johnny and Billy and Menachem, and everybody's there, and they're having a good time splashing at the ocean. But when you look at the negative, you can't really see it. In fact, it's in reverse. That's what he's doing here at the same time. He's saying, we're poorly clothed, we're roughly treated, we're homeless, but I'm writing to people who have home. We toil, we work with our hands, we're reviled, and I want you to understand this so you can put all your life in perspective. We've become, verse 13, the scum of the world, the dregs of all things. And I want you to understand this so that you can model this. What kind of invitation is it to say, would you like to join us in our ministry? We are the dregs of the world. Now I've got a jumper on that says Jews for Jesus. What if I said dregs for Jesus? Come join us in our dreggedness. Come join me in our ministry where we're going to be counted as condemned to death, a spectacle to the world, and fools. And we are counted like that. But you don't get a whole lot of followers if you invite people to the folly ministry. Come be disregarded. Come be mistreated. Come be misunderstood. Ooh, where do I sign up? And yet, dear friend, that's the reality. I don't know why we look at the model of people like Joel Osteen. He's an American preacher from Texas, and he has every Sunday 20,000 people in a convention center applauding him and laughing at his jokes. He's got a big old smile. He's a very happy fella, and he's got a beautiful wife. He's a handsome guy too, I guess. Handsome young couple. And he's got 20,000 people who come to this arena that used to be a basketball stadium, and the church bought it. Some Christians look at ministry and say, yeah, I'll take that kind of thing. I'd like to be like Joel rather than the Joel of the Bible. I'd like to be like Billy Graham and be treated so well by people around the globe. And they don't read the story of Billy Graham and how he was mistreated and mocked from the very beginning of his ministry when he set up and went out and preached and people ridiculed him harshly. We want the glory. We don't want the pain. And let's be honest, that's pretty much the real thing. So then when we find somebody who is our minister, we ruin them by one of three things. Adulation, where we praise them and we blow their head out of the sky. Or we manipulate them and make them do whatever we want to do anyway, where we tie their hand. Or we challenge them almost constantly in some kind of rejection, and we prevent their being a leader anyway. We break their heart. So we either make their head big, their hands tied, or their heart broken. And all the while, they, like the Apostle Paul, just wants us to do it right, to serve people, to row together and get it done. I don't know what it is. Is it celebrityism, where we look at ministers and say they're like rock stars? Oh, I'd love to be in his ministry. His ministry where people break his heart. His ministry where people... We don't see the real story of what people go through. We just see them public, and that's often just a shadow, not the real thing. I wonder if Billy Graham's happy. Tremendous man who's really copped it hard. That's because he stood up for something. If you stand for something, you're a target. And if you don't stand up for something, then everybody will like you, except those who stand for something.
I find it so true what you just said. I often think it's an illusion to look at other people's life, because when you see something and you think, wow, that's incredible, you don't see the darkness they had to go through or the struggle they had to go through to get there, so you just see the final result. And it can be so deceiving. The journey is often so different to walk through it.
Yeah, if somebody said to you, don't be afraid, which, by the way, is the number one command in the Bible, said more often than any other command. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Throughout the Bible. It's not like don't commit murder. It's not one of those. But it is, because God, every time he approaches humanity, you see it a lot. Don't be afraid. Fear not. But how do you get there? Your word journey. Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. We learn how not to be afraid when we go with the shepherd of our souls through the valley of even shadows of death.
Bob, isn't that not a contradiction when the God of the Old Testament is so fearful in many ways?
But he often says, don't be afraid, through the record of the Older Testament. And yet at the same time he says, fear God. So how does that work? You guys have had to work this out. How do you fear God and not fear God? Good question.
Don't be afraid of enemies, not so much don't be afraid of God.
Good. So reverence. It's a holy reverence. It's an awe. It's a respect. But it's more than respect, isn't it? It's at least respect. When your school teacher came in and you were just a puppy, you were a young kid and you'd been drawing, you'd been doing everything right. You were sitting politely and had your legs on the floor instead of the way guys hang from ceilings. So, you're doing everything right. And the teacher's teacher comes in, or the teacher's boss, the principal, comes in. All of a sudden, you're not doing anything wrong, but you felt like, I better do it better. You're driving down the street. You're not breaking any law. You see a policeman. Your foot goes off the pedal. You immediately look for, I hope my buckle, seatbelt, I'm on, yeah. But you're doing something wrong, even though you're doing nothing wrong. It's the role of authority that brings phobia, fear. But that's a healthy respect, not a fear of punishment.
The opposite of dismissing God.
Trivializing him, making him pedestrian. He is anything but. Yeah, don't be afraid, Yeshua said, of those who can destroy your body, your clothing, your stuff. But fear him who's able to destroy your body and soul in hell. Meaning God. Have this kind of awe, some reverence towards the one who can dominate. At the same time, he is called Father, because he welcomes us into his family. He doesn't welcome our sin. He doesn't welcome our messing up, but he welcomes us. That's beautiful. And every daddy tries to do that with his kid, at least in my world. Okay, I do. You love them, and you want them to stop messing up, and you want them to do the things you want them to do. At the same time, you got a little bit of distance between you and them. They're your mates, but it's not equality. There's still the Father who is greater than I. I know it's tough to sort.
So you're saying that to feel fearful when the police is by you, or am I doing something wrong, is a healthy sort of fear?
Yeah, it keeps you in check. In fact, it was in verse 3, to me it's a very small thing that I may be examined by you or by any human court. I looked up the word court because it was an unusual one to me, chimera, which means always another court, or daily, or daybreak, or day, or by any man day, any day in man. I'm not even going to be examined by people any old day. There's an interesting turn of phrase that the apostle uses, because he knows his acquittal is from heaven. That's an assurance that a son knows from his daddy. It's an assurance that we who have embraced the gospel and the death and resurrection of Jesus can smile at the end of the day and say, "Oof, thanks, Lord, that you love me." I'm not basing my relationship with God on me. I'm basing it on his awesome love. I mean, that's a great pillow into which to relax. That's better than a waterbed, even a heated waterbed. That's just great. So he's urging, the Apostle Paul, verse 14, is urging these people in Corinth to live differently because he treats them as kids. Not as juveniles, but as children who belong to him. Not belong in the sense of ownership, but for whom he's responsible. When I say my wife, I'm not saying my wife belongs to me. I'm saying I have a relationship with Patty. She's mine in that way. When I say this is my shop, I think, yes, territorially, yes, it's owner, yeah, it's that. But it's more than that. It's relational. And I want to make sure that it says about us and about Jesus more than just what books and DVDs would do. We have a mission statement, I suppose, a motto for the bookshop. This is a comfortable place for people to consider Yeshua. That's what we're about. So how do I make it into a comfortable place? Well, I have to first own it in the sense of I care what it says. I care about the people who come in. I want a connection between the shop, Yeshua, and the people. That's what I want. And if I can help that along, sweet. Then it's my shop. Not my shop like, hey, you get out of here. You don't belong in my shop. Kind of territorial my or possession my, but relational. And that's the way he's treating these folks. That's why in verse 16 he says, it's not tutors, but it's fathers. Be imitators, verse 16, of me. Monkey see, monkey do. The Greek word is mimetes, or to mime.
Exhort is to take something out.
Encourage, charge, not command, but to exhort is to, I really want you to get this. I'm encouraging you. Stir up, I think, is the Greek word. Stir up. Parakaleo, called alongside to help. Called, kaleo, para, alongside. So that's the word exhort. I'm called alongside you, which is what a daddy does. I was remembering that, another use of this word, when my kids all learned how to ride bikes. And I could show them, and I could teach them, and I could show them videos, or whatever we had in those days. I drew it on a piece of paper, stick figure. But if I really want to get them to learn it, I can't ride a bike next to them. I have to walk next to them, and hold them, and hold the bicycle. Oh, sure, we had the 2 training wheels, too. But the day we took off the training wheels for each of the kids, oh my, I had to run like nobody's business, and keep up with them, just in case they wobbled, and just, you had that experience when you learned, and somebody was there called alongside you. That's exhorting. As a helper, not a command. I exhort you, be imitators of me. You saw me do it? That's what I want you to do. So he's putting it in perspective here. You're not going to be tutoring others, though you will be training them, but you're going to be fathers to us. And as each of you around this table, and each of those folks listening to this online, I want everybody, everywhere, to take these messages to heart and look for 1 or 2 or 3 others to parakaleo, to come alongside and help and mentor and father or mother and be something to them and bring them further along. And then he calls to our example someone, Timothy, my beloved, verse 17.
Who's speaking?
This is Paul the Apostle, and Sosthenes, silent partner, the leader of the synagogue, who also came to faith there in Corinth. They're writing this letter. So Paul says, I sent you Timothy, and here Timothy got it right. That's why I've sent him to you. What did he get right? He's my beloved. He's faithful. He's my child, but he's an adult in the Lord. And he'll remind you of my ways which are in Messiah, just as I teach everywhere in every church. So I'm sending him along to kind of fill full what this letter doesn't impart. His letters are like emails. You can't really tell what sentiment goes along with it. So now what do we do with emails? We put emoticons on, little smiley faces or little frowny faces or sneers or kind of weird faces that we put on there to try to fill in on an email what you're really thinking. Because you can't tell. Can you? You've misinterpreted emails. I have. How can you read? What does LOL mean? Laugh out loud. But what does that really mean? So you don't know what somebody means when they do it. Or he, which is kind of the phrasal LOL. I don't know if they're being cutesy. I don't know if they're being stupid. I don't know if they're really laughing at something that isn't funny. Honestly, I don't know what that means. You know a lot more on Skype than you do on email. Why? You can see the face. But even that can be a little, and Skype, the advantage is you can also hear their tone and you can relate a little more. But I like physical. I like being in the same room with somebody. I like to smell them. I like to see their, I don't know, Skype is not so precise. You can't see the eye, kind of the rolled eye. Oh, you know, one of those. You can't always see that on Skype. Or they can cover it. You don't know. But in person, one-to-one. That's why Paul is sending Timothy to be the living email, the living Skype. And I uploaded a photo somebody sent me today. Absolutely brilliant. It's Jesus talking to somebody, and he says, no, not on Twitter. I want you really, literally, to follow me. I thought that was so great. Because you can follow somebody on Twitter and you're just listening to whatever rant and rave and comments they make. But to follow somebody is not just to eavesdrop on their random thoughts, but it's to be there with them. And I guess if I can make this into a clear point tonight, it's that Yeshua's person on earth, the Apostle Paul at this point to these people, doesn't want to be the territorial manager. He wants to be a father and help them all grow up to be fathers themselves. So if I have to be scum of the earth, if I have to be homeless, if I have to be slandered, hungry, thirsty, weak, indistinguished, without honor, so be it. And I'm going to be there present with you, and I'm going to send somebody present, Timothy in this case, to be with you, and he'll fill it full, because I want you guys to grow and mature and live life not ignorantly, not as if you are somebody. Because thinking that you are somebody, meaning above others, superior, above others, I'm not talking about self-worth, I'm talking about greater worth than everybody else. Pride is only going to hurt you and all the people around you. Now, verse 18, some have become arrogant, as though I weren't coming. But I'll come if the Lord wills, and not with the words of those who are arrogant. Look, the whole point is not how smart you are, but how living it you are. Verse 21, with love and a spirit of gentleman. Have you sorted that out? It's not about how many words you've got, how many Bible verses you've memorized, how righteous you are, how holy you are in the midst of other people. But are you really loving and gentle to others? And if you've got that down, you've got the gospel. It's working. That's what he wants. And he wants to be rewarded in seeing that from them. So he has to write sometimes a little harsher, like a daddy would, than he really wants to, so that they grow and be imitators of this one who counts himself as the dregs of the earth. That's a great image to me. He's an under rower who stays under. He's okay, though others attribute to him adulation. Not the Corinthians, but others adore him and exalt him. And he says, look, you really want to get in on it? Come downstairs in the rowboat with me. We'll get somewhere together. We'll listen to our captain and away we go. That's 1 Corinthians 4, the way I see it.
You've been listening to the Bible class of Jews for Jesus in Australia. For more information, contact Jews for Jesus, Post Office Box 925, Sydney, Australia 2001. God bless you.